Have you ever wondered why a man only truly sees a woman once she's no longer looking back? He doesn't feel her absence at first. Not really. Not in the places that matter. The silence is subtle at the beginning, like a room without music, like a flame that still glows but no longer warms. But eventually, it comes for him, in the hollows of the night, in the echo of her absence, in the mirror where he sees the shadow of a man who once thought he could control what he refused to understand. She didn't scream, she didn't beg. She simply withdrew, slowly, softly, like a tide receding from a shore that never bothered to notice its rhythm. She left not in fury, but in knowing. And that is the most dangerous kind of departure, the kind that does not seek to be missed. This is not a tale of heartbreak in the shallow, performative sense. It is the deeper tale of a woman who did her shadow work and a man who refused to face his. Of a woman who learned to hold her silence like a sword, and a man who mistook her softness for submission, and it was far too late. You see, in the psychology of the masculine ego, there is an unspoken addiction to being the sun in every room, to be the one observed, not the one observing. A man, especially one untethered from inner depth, seeks validation in feminine attention, not as proof of his own worth. He does not ask why she watches him. He only drinks the gaze and forgets that it too can dry up. But a woman rooted in her feminine essence, her spiritual, intuitive, ancient power knows that attention is sacred. She watches not because she is weak, but because she is discerning. She stays until the silence inside her becomes louder than his words. She gives until giving becomes self-betrayal. Then, without drama, she withdraws. The man, still cloaked in ego, thinks she is playing a game. He thinks silence is a tactic. He has not yet learned that silence is a language of the soul. That when a woman turns inward, she is not retreating from him. She is returning to herself. It is then that the obsession begins, not in love, but in loss of control. He becomes haunted, not by her presence, but by his inability to reach her through the tools he once used: charm, promises, apologies, laced with undertones of manipulation. Nothing works now, because she is no longer seeking to be understood by someone committed to misunderstanding her. This is the feminine in her spiritual detachment, no longer seduced by potential. She has stopped trying to heal what refuses to be held accountable. Carl Jung wrote that we do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. She did. She looked into her patterns, her longing to fix, to soothe, to be chosen, and she saw the shadow in herself. The need to be needed, the ache to be seen. And she dismantled it, alone, in silence. While he projected his shadows onto her, she was busy integrating hers. That's what terrifies him the most. Not that she's gone, but that she's free. Because the man who lives unconsciously, who mistakes possession for connection, cannot comprehend a woman who walks away without looking back. He believes his silence will punish her, but she has learned that silence is sanctuary. He believes distance will make her chase, but she is no longer moved by proximity, she is moved by peace. You, watching this now, may recognize a piece of yourself in her story. The long nights of trying to make him understand, the loop of explaining, hoping, repeating. But understand this: when you walk away with grace, with wholeness, you are not abandoning love, you are honoring it by no longer offering it to someone who feeds on it without reciprocation. And he, the shadowed man, is left to confront the one person he has always avoided, himself. He will try to replace her, at first with noise, loud distractions, temporary women, anything to mute the hollow sound of her absence, the way she didn't beg, the way she didn't need closure, the way she made silence feel like thunder. But no matter who shares his bed or texts his phone, none of them echoed the stillness she left behind. Because she wasn't just a woman, she was a mirror. And now that mirror is gone, he is forced to see his own reflection unfiltered. This is the unspoken terror of the man who never did his inner work. When the woman who once held space for his emotional avoidance finally turns away, he stands exposed, naked in front of his unacknowledged wounds. She no longer carries the emotional labor. The weight is his now, and he doesn't know what to do with it. You see, the feminine energy, when conscious, awakened, and no longer fractured by validation, seeking, does not return to places where her spirit was fragmented. She rises, and her rising is not loud, not performative. It is like dawn, soft, inevitable, undeniable. She doesn't need to declare her growth. Her absence does it for her. In Jungian psychology, this moment marks the initiation of the animate, inner feminine in every man. Long ignored, long rejected, the woman he once tried to mold, control, decode. She was a living symbol of his denied anima. When she walked away, she took with her the reflection he had grown dependent on. And now, to know her again, even if only symbolically, he must go inward. Not to win her back, but to meet himself. But here is where most men falter. Rather than step into the uncomfortable terrain of introspection, they spiral into projection. He blames her coldness. He rewrites the narrative. She changed, he tells himself. She was too sensitive, too hard to please, too much. He cannot yet admit that her silence was the final boundary, the last chance. The mirror turned away. You, woman of depth, must remember this. The masculine ego is most fragile when it believes it is unbreakable. And your departure doesn't just bruise his pride, dismantles the illusion that he could ignore your soul and still own your loyalty. So he oscillates, hot one moment, distant the next. He might reach out. A simple message disguised as casual. Hope you're well. But it's not really about your wellness. It's a thread thin and trembling, hoping you'll grasp it. Pull it tight, make things easy again. But the woman who has learned to sit in her own stillness will not respond to breadcrumbs. She no longer feeds on crumbs when she has discovered the feast within. She has embraced detachment not as a defense, but as a devotion to self. She no longer enters conversations that cost her peace. She no longer entertains apologies built on the expectation of forgiveness without change. And most of all, she does not mistake nostalgia for a sign. There's a reason fairy tales warn of mirrors, forests, and spells. Because the journey into the self is a labyrinth, and not all who enter make it out whole. She entered, and she faced herself, her insecurities, her patterns, her own capacity to abandon herself in the pursuit of his attention. And she emerged, not perfect, but awake. He, the shadowed man, stands now at the threshold of the same journey. But the difference is choice. She chose to heal. He must now choose whether to remain in the cycle, finally break it. The pain he feels is not her punishment, is the ache of unprocessed truth. The reckoning of all the moments he mistook her softness for simplicity. The regret of not listening when her silence first began to speak. And yet, regret does not equal realization. Many men sit inside the ruins of their relationships and still refuse to lift the veil, because awareness demands accountability. And for the first time, he is alone with both. Do you see now why the woman who walks away is feared more than the woman who stays? Because staying, pleading, explaining that can be managed, controlled, but walking away, that's power. The power is not in her footsteps, but in her decision. It is not the act of leaving that unravels him, is the stillness that follows. The kind of stillness that feels like judgment, not because she condemns him, but because silence does not lie. She no longer reacts. She no longer explains. And in the absence of her energy, his own truth is revealed in sharp, unfiltered contrast. This is the unseen battlefield of emotional dynamics, the psychic war that unfolds in the silence after goodbye. He thought she was a muse, a mirror, a soft place to land. But she was more than that. She was the guardian of her own intuition. She loved him, perhaps deeply, but she never belonged to him. The difference, he realizes too late, is everything. Her disappearance leaves him spiraling through the stages of ego death denial, blame, obsession, collapse. But still, he doesn't call it grief. He won't name it as love lost or responsibility ignored. That would mean admitting he could have chosen differently, and the masculine ego rarely bows willingly. Not until it's broken open. You, woman of silence and soul, have become a paradox to him now. Mysterious in your absence, irreplaceable in your detachment. He studies your stillness the way he once studied your affection lie now. It confuses him more, because it is no longer his to interpret. You no longer exist within the confines of his control. And so, he projects. She never cared, he says. She was heartless. But deep down, he knows. He knows you were the one who tried. The one who listened, gave, hoped. And that every moment of your retreat was not a performance. It was a warning. A quiet unraveling of your emotional investment, thread by thread, until there was nothing left to hold. Jung spoke of the shadow as the part of ourselves we repress, deny, exile. And for many men, that shadow is feminine. Vulnerability, emotion, intuition, the things he was taught to suppress in order to appear strong. And yet, it was those very things that drew him to her. Her softness, her presence, her capacity to feel deeply. But when she offered that depth, he rejected it, because he wasn't ready to feel his own. He wanted her light without confronting his darkness, her nurturing without meeting his own wounds, her devotion without reflection. And now she is gone, not because she hated him, but because she loved herself more. Do you understand how rare that kind of woman is? The kind who doesn't make a scene but leaves a legacy, who doesn't ask for closure because she is the closure, who walks away not because she's lost interest, but because she found her power. That's what haunts him. Not her rage, not her pain, but her poise. Because it signals a transformation he hasn't undergone. A level of emotional evolution he still resists. And in the aftermath of her departure, he must confront the truth that she was not waiting to be chosen. She was waiting for him to wake up, to see, to feel, to grow. And now, the invitation is gone. She no longer needs to be seen, because she sees herself. She no longer needs to be heard, because her silence speaks more loudly than his noise. This is the essence of feminine spiritual detachment, the absence of emotion, but the presence of inner knowing. Not bitterness, but boundaries. Not cruelty, but clarity. And in this clarity, she remembers something he never fully understood. She was never his to possess. Only to meet, he had the courage. Now he faces a crossroads. Will he descend into bitterness, refusing to confront the pain she mirrored? Or will he begin his his own reckoning, the long inward journey toward healing, humility, and integration. That is his choice. Her story is no longer written in his chapters. She has turned the page. He may try to return, not in the way she deserves, but in the only way he knows. Through nostalgia, through ambiguity, through the vague promises of a man who has not yet made the journey into his own soul. His words might sound poetic. His voice might tremble with remorse. But she has heard apologies before that were only disguised attempts to restore comfort, not rebuild trust. What he does not yet understand is that the feminine spirit, once awakened, cannot be lulled back to sleep. She has seen behind the veil. She has tasted the freedom that comes from no longer needing to be desired by someone who never valued her essence. And though her heart may still ache from time to time, she does not mistake that ache for a sign to return. She understands now. Missing someone and going back to them are not the same thing. His attempts to reconnect are not acts of love. They are echoes of the ego mourning the loss of its supply. You see, when a man has not integrated his anima, his internal feminine, he seeks it externally. He clings to them, not out of reverence, but out of dependency. He desires their presence, but not their truth. And when that presence is no longer his to claim, he finds himself disoriented like a king without a crown he never earned. He tries again. He might say, "I've changed." He might whisper, "I finally see it now." But awakening cannot be performed. It must be lived. And the woman who has walked through her own fire, who has sat with the silence of her unmet needs, who has faced the aching mirror of abandonment, not just from him, but from herself, does not bow to words. She bows to energy, to actions, to resonance. She watches him now, not with longing, but with clarity, not with hope, but with sacred neutrality. This is the stage of individuation. Jung spoke of the psychic separation of the self from the projections of others. She no longer exists as his savior, nor his shadow. She is simply herself, whole, complex, no longer defined by his gaze or by his absence. And this wholeness is what breaks the cycle. He may linger at the threshold, hoping for the door to open again. But the door is no longer there. It was never a door, it was her. And she is not a place to return to. She is a path he must now walk on his own. She has become the symbol of his missed initiation. His unconscious knows this. That is why he dreams of her. Why he checks her profile but doesn't speak. Why he remembers the smallest things, her laugh, the way she paused before speaking, the silence she held when his actions failed to align with his words. And yet, remembering is not the same as transformation. He cannot reclaim her until he has reclaimed himself, until He descends into the underworld of his own mind. The regrets, the patterns, the lies he told himself to keep the illusion intact. Until he stops chasing her energy as a substitute for his own emotional labor. Until he learns to mother the wounded boy within, instead of seeking a woman to do it for him. But even then, she may not return, because her journey was never about being chosen. It was about choosing herself. And that choice, once made, reconfigures everything. Her friendships shift. Her desires evolve. Her standards rise. Not in arrogance, but in alignment. She no longer fears being misunderstood, because she no longer lives to be interpreted. She has become the sovereign of her own soul. And sovereignty, once tasted, is never surrendered again. You, listening now, may feel the stirrings of this transformation within you. You may be in the early stages of retreat, or you may already be far down the path of remembrance. Know this, you are not alone. The pain you feel is real, but so is the power beneath it. The ache is the doorway. The silence is the teacher. The stillness is the balm. Let him feel your absence. Let him sit in the space he once filled with noise. Do not explain your departure. It is enough that you left. Type, continue to receive the next part. There is a quiet majesty in a woman who no longer asks to be understood. Not out of pride, but out of wisdom. Out of the sacred realization that understanding cannot be extracted from someone unwilling to see beyond their own projection. She has shed the need to be explained, decoded, or translated. Her presence is no longer a puzzle to be solved, but a boundary that speaks, even in silence. And he, the man she once gave her softness to, now stands in the aftermath, grasping at fragments of memory, hoping to reconstruct what he once dismissed. But he cannot, because what he remembers is not the woman she is now, but the version of her he once consumed for comfort. And she has outgrown that version. You see, there is a turning point in every feminine journey when the inner girl who once chased, soothed, and waited transforms into a woman who simply walks away. Not out of vengeance, but out of reverence for herself, for her energy, for the life she is creating beyond emotional entanglement. This turning point is sacred. It is not born in one night. It builds slowly in the quiet moments. The mornings she wakes up numb. The apologies that arrive without action. The way her intuition flinches again and again, every time he breaks his word with a smile. And then, one day, something shifts. The pain stops being romantic. The longing stops being holy. And she remembers who she was before she made herself small, to be understood by someone who only loved fragments of her depth. That remembrance is the beginning of everything. From the outside, it may look sudden, cold, even cruel. But those who walk the path of emotional awakening know better. They know that behind every silent woman is 1,000 unheard pleas, 100 journal pages of confusion, 1,000,000 inner negotiations. Until the war within her finally ends not in explosion, but in release. She doesn't just leave him, she leaves behind the part of herself that tolerated what she once called love. And that is a grief too few understand. But it isn't. It's about the self-respect that blooms when a woman returns to her center. Jung described the feminine as the vessel through which transformation flows, and she has become that vessel, not just for him, but for herself. Through her detachment, she has transmuted pain into power. Through her absence, she has created a space for him to meet his true self, remain as he was. She no longer tries to control that outcome, because the healed feminine does not need control. She needs truth, and if that truth is abandonment, so be it. If that truth is silence, she will wear it like a crown. If that truth is walking alone, she will do so barefoot through the fire, because now she knows. Being alone, in truth, is far softer than being accompanied in confusion. The man, still circling his ego, may continue to test her boundaries. A message here, a memory sent there, a breadcrumb, hoping to lure her back into the narrative where she played the forgiving, understanding, ever-returning role. But the woman who has walked away has burned the script. She no longer performs for someone who cannot meet her in the same emotional dimension. She no longer returns to the scene of her own abandonment, because something deeper is calling her now. A version of herself that doesn't just survive without him, but thrives. And that's what scares him most. Not that she hates him, not that she forgot him, but that she healed in a way that made him irrelevant. There comes a moment when the man realizes, not because she's found someone else, not because she holds resentment, but because she no longer exists in the emotional frequency where his voice still echoes. He can't reach her not truly, because she no longer waits at the edge of his awareness, hoping for him to awaken. She has dissolved the contract that once bound her to his potential. And that is the true ending not of love, but of illusion. You see, many men fall in love not with a woman's reality, but with the idea of her. The way she makes him feel, the way she sees him when even he cannot. She becomes his mirror, his muse, his emotional compass sand for a while. He feels powerful in her presence, admired, needed, important, but when she begins to ask for more, for depth, honesty, emotional presence, he withdraws. Not because she is wrong, but because he fears being seen beyond his persona. He wanted to be adored, not exposed. And so she becomes too much, too emotional, too intuitive, too demanding. too deep. But the truth is she was never too much. He was simply too unready. And now she is gone. He replays her words in his mind, trying to decipher what they meant. He searches for clues in her silences, hoping to decode her final moment of detachment. He romanticizes her, suddenly craving the very parts of her he once ignored. Her laugh, her gaze, the way she could read his emotions before he spoke them aloud. But this craving isn't love. It's absence masquerading as affection. It's ego mourning the loss of control. He doesn't miss her as a person. He misses how he felt when she loved him. And that distinction is everything. You, woman of remembering, have lived this story. Perhaps you are still in it. Perhaps you still wonder if you were too harsh, if maybe you could have stayed a little longer, explained a little more. But deep inside, you know you already did. You over-explained, you overheld, you overgave. And when your cup ran dry, you were expected to keep pouring. But the feminine, in her sacred nature, cannot bloom in depletion. She blooms in fullness, in safety, in reflection. And once you realized that your emotional labor was mistaken for obligation, not devotion, you withdrew, not as punishment, but as resurrection. He will feel this eventually, maybe not all at once, maybe not even consciously. But he will feel the shift, the way the world dulls a little without your presence. The way other women don't feel the same. The way nothing quite stirs his soul like the memory of the one who saw all of him and still chose to stay until staying became a betrayal of herself. That's what he couldn't comprehend in time. That love is not just about being chosen. It's about choosing back. And he never truly chose her in the way that mattered. Not in depth, not in accountability, not in growth. He chose the version of her that stayed soft in the face of disappointment. The version that believed in his potential more than he believed in himself. But when she evolved, when she began choosing herself, he was left behind. That's the thing about feminine energy. When it matures, no longer seeks salvation through another's awakening. It offers the light. Yes, it loves in fullness. But it does not wait in the darkness for someone else to open their eyes. She has opened hers. And through those eyes, she sees now what she couldn't before. That love is not sacrifice. That longing is not proof of connection. That chemistry does not equal compatibility. And that peace is more important than proximity. She doesn't need to prove her worth anymore. Because now, she embodies it. She no longer pleads to be loved right. She walks where she is loved in truth. And should he ever see her again months, years later, there will be a reverence in his silence. A recognition, a quiet knowing that she was the turning point he didn't take. Not because she wasn't enough, but because she was the mirror he wasn't ready to look into. And once a mirror walks away, all that's left is the shadow. There is a stillness at the end of it all. Not an empty kind of stillness, but a sacred one. A silence that speaks volumes, that hums with the echoes of everything she once whispered, cried, and withheld. A silence that no longer aches because now it rests. She has not only walked away from him, she has walked away from every version of herself that needed him. The version that questioned her worth when he withdrew. The version that bent to be digestible. The version that stayed in hopes he would one day see her. That version is no more. And what remains is a woman who has remembered herself completely. She has reclaimed her voice, not to speak louder, but to speak only when her soul is aligned. She has re-inhabited her body not for anyone else's gaze, but as a sanctuary. She has returned home to herself, and in doing so, she has become untouchable. Not in a hardened way, but in a holy one. Because when the feminine chooses herself, when she integrates her shadow, when she stops abandoning her intuition for the sake of emotional crumbs, she becomes a force that no man, no circumstance, no memory can diminish. That's the true alchemy, not the man changing. And yet, the paradox remains. She once loved him. Truly, she gave from a place of softness, from the sacred wellspring that exists in all women who haven't yet learned to gatekeep their love. And for that, there will always be a trace of tenderness in her memory of him. But memory is not reason enough to return, nor is longing, because now she knows peace is her new standard. Peace, not chaos. Presence, not promises. And she will never again trade her inner stillness for someone else's emotional noise. In the quiet corners of his life, he will feel this. He will sense the vacuum she left behind. The way his mind drifts to her in the in-between moments. The way his heart clenches when he hears a song that once played in her car. The way her name still lives in the space between his breath and his regret. But it will not bring her back, because she is no longer waiting to be understood. She has become the understanding. And the man who once ignored her emotional depth must now dive into his own. Alone, that is the cost of refusing to meet a woman where she stands when she finally walks away. You are left only with the echo of what could have been. Let this be your reckoning. Whether you are the woman who stayed too long, or the man who took too much. Let this be the moment you step beyond the roles you've played, the wounds you've projected, the stories you've repeated. Let this be where you stop performing and begin becoming. Because in the end, all relationships are mirrors, and the ones that break you They do so to show you what still lies hidden within. The woman who walked away didn't leave to hurt him. She left because she refused to keep hurting herself. She didn't choose absence out of punishment. She chose absence because presence without respect is self-abandonment. And now, her return is no longer possible, not because she is unfeeling, but because she has become free. Free from the ache. Free from the ache. Free from the illusion that her value is measured by how long she endures. She is not bitter, she is reborn. And as she stands now, in the fullness of her solitude, she does not beg, chase, or explain. She simply chooses. Because the woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses. You've just witnessed the invisible unfold, how a woman's silence becomes the final lesson a man never saw coming. How the feminine, once fractured by longing, becomes whole in her stillness. And how, in walking away, she did not abandon love, she redefined it. This wasn't just his story, it was hers, and perhaps yours too. Let this story stay with you as a reminder. You do not need to prove your worth to be worthy. You do not need to shrink to be seen. And you never, ever need to chase what was never willing to meet you in your fullness. In the end, it's not about who stays, it's about who grows. So, if you're in the place between heartbreak and healing, remember this. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses. And today, may you choose you. Thank you for listening. Be gentle with your heart.